The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening. This is Les Smith. I'm with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, and I am this evening's webinar host. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have an informational session scheduled this evening, webinar concerning Wolverine Worldwide Filter Operation and Maintenance Response Activity Plan. We're going to go over a few of this evening's agenda for this webinar. Our webinar will be hosted by Ms. Karen Vorse from the Remediation and Redevelopment Division, Grand Rapids District Office, and we will have some other guests later during the webinar. Karen will be providing some information during this evening's session on the O&M filter plan for drinking water filters. Following her presentation will be a question and answer session. Well, you, the attendees, will have an opportunity to ask questions of Karen and staff regarding the response activity plan. Also this evening, as you may be aware, EGLE is in the early stages of a public comment period concerning this response activity plan. So we're going to share with you this evening some ways to provide official written comment to the department with regards to this particular response activity plan. And lastly, we will provide you with contact information if you have further questions. As with all EGLE webinars, all lines are muted during the webinar. Questions that you may have regarding the content this evening may be written in the GoToWebinar control panel. There is a question box for you to use in the GoToWebinar toolbar. And we also want you to be aware that this webinar is being recorded, and we will provide information about what will happen with that later in this webinar. So how will tonight's meeting work? In a few moments, Karen Vorse from the EGLE Remediation and Redevelopment Division, she's the project manager there, will begin her presentation. She is going to walk you through some of the details of the draft filter and operation and maintenance response activity plan, which I'm just going to call response activity plan going forward. Before we have that discussion, I would like to talk very briefly about how we will handle questions. As we go through this presentation, please feel free to enter any questions you would like answered today in the question box. Again, that's located in the webinar control panel. Tonight's panelists following the presentation will be consisting of agency staff from EGLE and from our Department of Attorney General's office. We'll attempt to answer any questions that you have regarding this response activity plan. You may also send your comments concerning the response activity plan to the email address that is on the screen. And for any of our viewers, any of our listeners who are listening only by telephone, we have an email address of eagle-rrd-housestreet@michigan.gov. Again, that's EGLE, EGLE-RRD, which is Robert David, House Street as one word, HOUSESTREET @michigan.gov. So that'll be an avenue for sending questions that you may have if you're listening by phone. The email address is also located on the Belmont website, which is www.michigan.gov/Belmont webpage. Again, to our friends who may be listening by phone, if you have called into tonight's webinar and are not participating via the internet, unfortunately, we will not be able to unmute your phone lines during the question and answer session. However, if you are participating by phone only, you have questions about tonight's webinar topics, there are a couple of ways to get answers. Again, you may send your questions to the eagle-rrd-housestreet@michigan.gov email address, or you may contact Karen Vorse, the EGLE project manager, at 616-439-8008. We will share this information again toward the end of today's webinar. And just one other last comment about using the webinar control system. When we get to the question and answer session following Karen's presentation, I've highlighted here on the screen on the left, you'll see where the question bar is for typing in a question. If you would like to verbally ask a question, there's an opportunity to raise your hand in the webinar control system. If you see the green up arrow, click that to indicate you want to raise your hand. If after you've already raised your hand, you've decided maybe not, you don't want to ask your question verbally, you can click the hand with the red down arrow to lower your hand. And I know that might sound a little confusing, but I will go over again later during the question and answer session about the green up arrow to raise your hand and the red down arrow to lower your hand. And with that, I'm going to transfer control over to Karen, who is tonight's presenter about the filter O&M plan. And Karen, I am going to transfer control to you.
All right, sounds good.
And here we are.
All right, let me pull up this presentation. All right, can you see that all right?
Yes.
Okay, and then I'll also share my webcam for everyone to see. Okay, let me minimize that so it doesn't take up my entire screen. Okay, well, thanks again, everyone, for coming to virtually to this online public meeting. We are going to be discussing Wolverine's draft filter operation and maintenance, or O&M, response activity plan tonight, May 26th. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background information. Most of you watching may already be very familiar and intimate with the February 19th, 2020 consent decree, but just for those who may not or would like a little refresher, I will start out with just a little bit of background just to kind of setting the stage for why we have this response activity plan. So there is a consent decree that became effective. It was approved by U.S. District Court Judge Janet T. Neff of the U.S. District Court for Western Michigan on February 19th, 2020. And that consent decree is between the state of Michigan, plaintiff, Plainfield and Algoma Townships as intervening plaintiffs, and Wolverine Worldwide as the defendant. This entire document, including all of its attachments, can also be found on our website at www.michigan.gov/Belmont. And this document really serves as the framework for all future PFAS response activities that Wolverine will conduct in the North Kent study area. On this slide, you'll see a figure, and that depicts the outline of what is considered the North Kent study area. And this is the actual geographic area that the consent decree covers and applies to. Roughly, you know, it's as far north as 12 Mile, south to the Grand River, as far west as Pine Island Drive, and as far east as downtown Rockford. It's approximately 20 to 25 square miles in area. So it is a very large area that this consent decree covers. And one of the requirements of that is that Wolverine will conduct these activities under Eagle state oversight, and all of their work that they're doing, they will be submitting these response activity plans for agency review and approval and for comment. And as part of that, we are requesting public comment as well. We want to include any concerns or comments that the public who this is impacting would have in our agency review of any response activity plans. I will note that this consent decree did go through a public comment period in early February, and there was a public meeting held by Attorney General Dana Nessel and after that comment period is when the judge approved the consent decree for becoming effective. So the general requirements of the consent decree that Wolverine must undertake include a number of things, but I just kind of wanted to highlight the main response activities that are discussed. First one being, of course, municipal water expansion to over 1,000 parcels. That's discussed in Section 6 of the consent decree. The response activity we're going to be focusing on tonight is the filter operation and maintenance requirements. That's discussed in Section 7.5 and also Appendix L of the consent decree. And this is really where this filter operation and maintenance response activity plan kind of falls under the consent decree. There's also response activities for residential drinking water sampling, well sampling. That's discussed in 7.6 of the decree. Site source control actions at the downtown Rockford Tannery site. That's discussed in Section 7.7, as well as source control at the House Street disposal site. That's discussed in Section 7.8. Various groundwater investigations within that North Kent study area also need to be conducted, and those are discussed in Section 7.9. And then also there's the groundwater surface water interface investigation requirement, or GSI investigation. That's discussed in 7.10 of the consent decree, and that will be our kind of focus tomorrow on our webinar on the 27th. We'll go into the GSI response activity plan. But for tonight, we are going to be focusing on filters, and so just kind of as a general overview for when we're talking about the plan moving forward, filter areas within the North Kent study area just means areas within the study area where municipal water will not be extended as a requirement of this consent decree. So if you can see the slide, that's all of the parcels that are highlighted in purple. And then within those areas, Wolverine is required to maintain filters at homes with levels of PFOA and PFOS which exceed 10 parts per trillion prior to treatment, so the water coming into their home. And that is until any new criteria become effective that may be lower than 10 parts per trillion. And then also Section 7.5 in the consent decree has language in there about when a home is connected to municipal water, or if a home that had a filter installed by Wolverine previously is below 10 parts per trillion PFOA and PFOS, Wolverine will pay to have that filter removed, or the homeowner can choose to keep their filter and ongoing maintenance of that. That's further discussed in the consent decree as well. And again, on this figure, the area in red just denotes the new municipal water areas, so the roughly 1,000 parcels that will be receiving municipal water as part of the consent decree, and the light blue shaded parcels just represents parcels that already have existing municipal water and are connected to that. So another aspect of the consent decree that really focused on filters is something that's called the Statement of Work for Filter Operation and Maintenance, O&M. This is Appendix L of the consent decree, and basically what this is it proposed the general approach and rationale for revisions to Wolverine's existing operation and maintenance plans that they had for filters. Wolverine began installing filters in homes at the end, kind of in the fall of 2017. And so they have had these O&M plans, various versions they've updated as time has gone on. And so we knew that based on the consent decree, the existing O&M plans that Wolverine was using would need to be updated to show those changes. And so those two plans are the Point of Entry Treatment System, or POET, P-O-E-T for short, Filter O&M Plan. Before the consent decree, that most recent update was March 2019. And then there's also the point of use, or POU, filtration maintenance memo. That's for the under the sink filters. And that was previously updated May 2018 prior to the consent decree. And Appendix L was technically publicly noticed and approved as part of the consent decree in that process. And the figure on this slide just again reiterates the filter area map that can also be found in Appendix D of the consent decree. And so Appendix L, you know, the statement of work, the main takeaways from that, the changes that really occurred to Wolverine's O&M plans, was that Wolverine was going to now move to a presumptive carbon change out. So that means that there's a predetermined schedule for homes which utilize the POUT or the whole house filters to actually have that carbon changed out on a schedule, regardless of having to keep testing, waiting for that breakthrough. Even if it's still non-detect at the midpoint, it needs to be changed out. We'll go a little bit more into that detail in that schedule in the next slide. Another main change that occurred that was summarized in Appendix L was an updated routine monitoring schedule of the filters, again, to coincide with the new presumptive carbon change out. And then there also was a general cessation plan for filters at homes that were going to be being hooked up to municipal water, or homes in the filter areas that were below that 10 parts per trillion PFOA and PFOS, but Wolverine had previously installed a filter in their home. Residents should have already received letters from Wolverine Worldwide and their environmental consultant, GZA, regarding the consent decree after it became effective, and that letter summarized changes to their home's individual filter O&M status and schedule. So if you're a resident and you're watching this and you did not get a letter, you can contact me. My contact info will be on the last slide of this presentation, and we can help track down that letter for you. It should have came directly from Wolverine. As you know, one neighbor's letter may look different than another's depending on your influent concentration and what type of filter you have installed. So just to kind of go over, I know a lot of residents have, previous to this meeting, have had questions about just the carbon change-out schedule and how that kind of works. So basically, before the consent decree was entered, there were various sampling frequencies that houses with whole house filters were sampled. Some of them with the higher concentrations were sampled on a weekly basis. Some of them were sampled monthly, some of them quarterly, so 4 times a year. Some systems were just sampled twice a year. And then homes that actually had whole house filters installed that were kind of in the original study area in the early days that were non-detect, Wolverine did choose to install some whole house filters there, and those were sampled annually. And so based upon that information and kind of the past 2.5 years of all of this sampling and ongoing environmental investigation, Wolverine and the engineers were able to come up with carbon change out intervals to presumptively change out to new virgin unused carbon on these houses. And so this is the proposed and now approved with the consent decree schedule of that carbon change out. So just for example, if your home used to be sampled weekly, now the carbon, the actual granular activated carbon vessels, the lead vessels on that, will be changed out every 6 months. The majority of these weeklies, just an example, have already had that done since the consent decree was finalized, and then the majority of them actually will be hooked up to municipal water this coming summer, so they likely won't go through that another cycle of 6 months for another change. And so that's kind of just a quick overview of the presumptive carbon change out schedule. That's something that's new. The other is the routine monitoring or performance monitoring, the actual sampling of the filters. And so along with the presumptive carbon changeouts and that schedule, performance monitoring, obviously still will be completed for quality assurance and quality control of the filters. And so again, the weeklies, after all of those have been changed out, they're still all going to be tested, at least after the first carbon change out. All of them should, with the exception of maybe one, be hooked up within the next 6 months. So it would just likely be maybe one more that would have to have another sampling. And then the last column of this table shows which ports in the whole house filter will be sampled. There's 3 testing ports on these filters. One of them is influent or IN. That's the water coming into the home before it is treated or filtered. So it's the raw water. There's a midpoint tap, which is in between the lead and the lag carbon vessel or vessels. So it's right in the midpoint, the middle of the filtration system. And then there is an effluent or EF, and that represents the water after granular activated carbon, after it's been filtered, and it's the water that would be going into the home. And so depending on the former monitoring schedule of that also affects, the sampling ports are all pretty much the same as what they were before. There's just a little bit of a different with the presumptive carbon change out. We're going to be spot checking houses and making sure everything's on a random basis is working out for QA/QC purposes. Further details of this sampling can be found in section 6.5.3 of the actual Wolverine's point of entry treatment system filter O&M plan. I will note on this table, there will be left in the filter areas, so those purple areas we show, there will be, I believe it is 3 parcels that have concentrations over 70 parts per trillion that will rely on a filter, and those 3 houses will have their filter sampled regardless after each carbon change out, just for clarification. That's one of the footnotes on the table that I just couldn't copy and paste on the slide to fit. And so this filter O&M plan, really what this is that Wolverine submitted for agency review and for you all to get us your comments. It contains all of the details regarding the maintenance of the filters that Wolverine's been maintaining for the last 2.5 years. So specifically, the parts of this plan that would be, excuse me, subject to this comment period are those sections and specifics that were not, provided or established in the consent decree or Appendix L. And so as part of this O&M plan, filter O&M plan, Wolverine submitted 2 documents. The first one is the alternate water supply management plan for point of entry treatment systems, or POUs. That's a 14-page text document that also includes attachments. So that's a total of 55 pages. And this document really just summarizes the maintenance procedures of the POUs systems, or also referred to as whole house filters. The second document that's part of the filter O&M response activity plan is the Aquasana 5300 Plus point of use filtration maintenance memo. That's a 2-page memo report, so much shorter, and that discusses the maintenance, the ongoing maintenance for the point of use or under the sink filters. And those have been Aquasana 5300 Plus brand filters that Wolverine has installed. That's just a picture of one of them at the bottom of the slide. So I kind of want people to understand that these plans are the plans that Wolverine has been using to perform the O&M for the last 2.5 years. And they have recently been updated with the consent decree requirements. So we'll get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts here to try to get some clarification for some folks on specifically the whole house filters or the POUs. really this plan, the alternate water supply management plan for POUs, is broken up into 7 sections. So when you crack that open, you're going to see in the first section is just a normal introduction, followed by just a little bit of background information in section 2. And then section 3 focuses on communication with residents that Wolverine has who have filters installed by them. Section 4 goes into the system overview and design. So that's kind of where it starts to get a little bit more technical. And I included a kind of drawing here, a schematic of Culligan's system flow design. That's also included in Appendix A of Wolverine's POUs filter plan. And so I'll just kind of walk through real quick where the water flows through the system and kind of how in general these granular activated carbon filters work. So first, the water shown by this blue arrow here. Let me try to get a pointer, get a laser pointer. So we have the water from the well coming into the home. It obviously goes into some sort of pressure tank to get pressure. And then the first part of the filter systems it goes through is a pre-filter or a sediment filter. This does not have any granular activated carbon or anything. This is just to filter out sand and sediment that could be floating in the well water naturally as it's coming in. So that gets filtered out before it goes on to the next step. The next step, going through this process flow diagram, we pass, the influent test port. So we're going to be testing the water that's coming into the home before it goes into the first granular activated filter. And that's called a lead GAC vessel, granular activated carbon vessel. These filtration systems use Calgon F600AW granular activated carbon, and each carbon vessel is about 2 cubic feet in size. So the water comes in and goes through this first carbon vessel, and then it goes, here's the midpoint sampling tap, as it then moves through a lag carbon vessel or the second carbon vessel. This is strictly in place for redundancy as a second line of defense. If there's any sort of breakthrough in the first vessel, we have another vessel there to catch it. And that again is 2 cubic foot in size. Now, something to note, depending on the influent concentration going in a home or depending on water flow needs, some homes have more than just 2 carbon vessels. Some have 4 vessels, so 2 leads and 2 lags in parallel. And then there are a few that even have 8 carbon vessels, so a train of 4 and a train of 4. And so that allows for the double trains increased flow rate to up to 16 gallons per minute, where a single train with just a lead and a lag can allow flow of up to 8 gallons per minute. So that's why some houses have different configurations depending on the house's needs, the number of fixtures that they service, and then also the influent PFAS concentration coming in the home. And so after it goes through the lead and the lag carbon vessels, we're going to this guy right here. This is a post filter, a second sediment filter. So that's going to filter out any remaining particles or fine particles that could have been in the GAC vessels. Kind of polishes off any particles in the water before it flows through the water meter or flow meter. That just monitors the volume of water that is flowing through the system and has been treated. On its way, there is the effluent sampling point. That is the water that's treated and is going into the home. And it also flows through a ultraviolet UV lamp. And that is a precautionary measure to kill any bacteria that may be present in the water. So that's kind of, and then it goes out to the home. That's kind of just in a nutshell how the systems work in the homes where Wolverine has installed whole house filters. And that is, kind of discussed in section 4, as well as appendices A, B, and C. That gets into a lot more technical nature of regarding breakthrough of the carbon vessels and engineering and design. Different operation and maintenance tasks are further discussed in section 5. And so kind of, and folks who have whole house filters probably know this by heart now. Every 4 months, these 2 sediment filters we talked about, those get changed out because obviously they can get filled up and cause pressure issues. So every 4 months, those are changed out. Once a year, the UV lamp does need to be replaced and some components cleaned. So that occurs once a year. And then obviously we've kind of discussed the carbon vessel change out, and that's going to be on a schedule now. And so obviously when the crews are in there doing this work, it's Culligan is the people who are maintaining these systems, designed and installed them. And while they're there doing these tasks, they also check the system for overall operation and function, look for any leaks, any issues as well. And then somewhere in the O&M plan, it does talk about, and I think it's in the communication section, there should be on every filter kind of a contact card with who to contact if there's a leak, who to contact if you have questions or issues or need service. That is something that, we especially want to make sure every resident had an easy card to access that. And then section 6 gets a little bit more into the details of sampling methods. So it's going to go over different protocols of sampling, the schedule, data management of that sampling data and validation of the data at the lab, different reporting requirements that Wolverine now has that are established in the consent decree of how often they need to report this information and what format they need to report it. All of that is discussed in section 6. And then the last section is the filter cessation section in section 7, where again we discussed if you're going to be hooked up to municipal water or if you're below that 10 parts per trillion PFOA, PFOS in the filter areas. And I think that was the main points I want to cover on this. And so next steps for this particular response activity plan is we'll continue to take comments, written public comments through June 13th, 2020. And again, there's the email address again that you can email written comments to. So that's eagle-rrd-housestreet@michigan.gov. You can also mail comments to me at the office. Even though I'm working remotely, I can still have a way to go to the office and get those, to compile those. And after we get all of the comments on June 13th, Eagle prepares a response document. And that's going to summarize all of the written comments we got and kind of give how we're going to address those. And that document will be posted on our website on the Belmont, the www.michigan.gov/Belmont or the House Street MPART website. That document will be posted there for the public to view as well. And then we'll obviously incorporate any comments that need to be incorporated in our final response that we then send to Wolverine. After we've completed our review, we provide Wolverine a response regarding any requested edits and comments before we would approve a final filter O&M plan. And as we all know, there's lots of moving parts to this consent decree. So we just wanted to throw up a slide to let everyone know, kind of the due dates of the various response activity plans, the public meeting dates and the comment period associated with those. So far, we only have 2 response activity plans that we have public noticed and are open under this comment period. That is this filter O&M plan, which today is the public meeting, and then also the groundwater surface water interface, or GSI, response activity plan. Tomorrow's the public meeting for that. Both of them have a 30-day comment period, which started May 14th and goes until June 13th. We also have received the residential well resampling response activity plan. We received that a couple weeks ago now on May 4th. That is actually posted on our Belmont website already, so you don't need to necessarily wait for the official public comment period to like start reviewing that. You can get a head start on that. And we'll be working on, through the summer to figure out the best time to host a public meeting for that and then have the comment period. After that, in June, on June 18th, 2020, we're going to be getting 5 separate response activity plans that go along with 5 separate groundwater investigations. These are different areas within that overall big North Kent study area that's about 25 square miles. These are different sections of that, mostly filter areas that we're going to require Wolverine that they are required to do additional hydrogeo investigation and groundwater sampling and definition in those areas. So they're identified as area 5, 6, 11, 12, and R1/19. So that will make more sense when those come in. What the maps associated with each plan will show you, hey, oh, this is where area 5 is, this is where area 12 is. But again, we're gonna probably try and have one meeting, maybe a little bit of a longer meeting to try to talk about those, since they'll be very similar scopes of work and hydrogeo investigations, and then have a comment period for those as well. And then the last response activity plan this summer that we'll be getting in is August 17th, 2020. And that is for the perimeter wells. And what that is basically on the outside boundary of the North Kent study area. Wolverine will be installing kind of a sentinel or area-wide monitoring well network that they'll be monitoring over time. And that plan is due on August 17th. So all of those, as we get them in, we try to review those and get those posted online as fast as we can, within a week or two, week and a half of getting those submitted to us. Our staff is a little bit spread thin this summer, just due to the furloughs that the state is experiencing with 1 day a week furloughs for Eagle employees. But we are trying our best to get these all posted and out and get these public meetings done as soon as we can. And so with that, we want to hear from you. You can continue to submit your public written comments, your official comments through June 13th. Again, I'll be a broken record. Eagle, send it to this email, eagle-rd-housestreet@michigan.gov, or by mail. Snail mail works perfectly fine. Address it to me, Karen Vorse, and that's eagle-rrd, which stands for Remediation and Redevelopment Division. Our address is 350 Ottawa Avenue, NW, Unit 10. That's Grand Rapids, Michigan, 49503. And then also, when submitting comments, just make sure you note which response activity plan you are commenting on. So obviously for this one, you would put filter O&M plan. And if anyone on this webinar or who's watching it after it's been recorded has any questions about this filter O&M plan, I'd be more than happy to talk with you. My phone number is listed there, 616-439-8008, or you can email me at vorcek, VORCEK, @michigan.gov. And I think Les will now go over some housekeeping.
All right. Well, thanks, Karen, for this wonderful information on the filter response activity plan. For our meeting attendees, here's an opportunity now for you to ask questions of Karen about what you've heard tonight concerning the response activity plans. As I shared with you earlier, there's a couple of ways to do that. You can type a question in the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. Or if you would like to verbally ask a question, we can try that also. Just in your control panel with the green up arrow, the hand with the green up arrow, raise your hand, and I will I'll call your name first, and then I will unmute your mic, and you unmute it on your end, and then you can ask your question. And we can do that either way. Also joining us as our panelists for this part of the meeting, this question and answer session, we have Danielle Allison Yoakum she's an Assistant Attorney General with the Michigan Attorney General's Office, in case we have questions about the submittal of the filter response activity plan as it relates to the consent decree. So we have Karen and we have Danielle, and we're just going to wait for few more questions to come in. And wait, we have a hand. So let's start with the hand first. So I have a Sandy Stelt, and I apologize if I messed up your name, Sandy, but I'm going to unmute your mic so you can ask your question. Sandy, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Karen. Hi, Danielle. My only question, I did not have a chance to read all 60-some pages of it, but if you could shorthand for me, maybe if someone has a filter, and is there a criteria or a protocol now if they do have breakthrough in that filter, how it will be managed? If
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yep, that is in the filter O&M plan. At certain intervals, they do have to notify, obviously, the residents, and if it's ever in the effluent of what's going into the home, but in the midpoint, once it reached 35 parts per trillion in the midpoint, it has to be changed out. We don't anticipate that actually reaching that now with this presumptive carbon change out, because they will be being changed out much more frequently than I know a lot of them hadn't even been changed out in the 2.5 years or 2 years. But there still is a section in here that discusses breakthrough.
Okay, so we do have that built in there, because if you're checking it less frequent, I would worry, I would not want to see them do repeat testing if you're only testing once every 6 months, for instance.
Right.
Because then you'd have, okay. And will that number go down if the MCLs are lowered?
I say that's a good comment.
Okay.
That you could put in there. I think that's definitely a comment that we would have as well.
All right, thank you both.
Yeah. Okay, I'm looking for more questions. I don't see any hands raised at the moment, so let's see. Oh, Karen, I just moved into my home, my new home. So how do I know if the previous owners received a letter about the water filter in my home?
That's a good question. What I would say is reach out to me on my phone or my email, and we can double check your address and then make sure that if the homeowner never shared that letter with you, like if the move happened since the consent decree was effective and now, which I'm sure could happen since it's kind of that time of the year, let us know, and we can definitely make sure that you get a copy of that letter. My email is vorsk@michigan.gov, or you can give me a call at 616-439-8008.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I have another question for you. Where can I locate the draft O&M plan to read for myself?
Okay. Yep. So if you go on the www, let me go back one slide. Can you see that slide still, Les?
Yes. So we see the, we're looking at the response activity plan schedule due date.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at the bottom of the page is that website, www.michigan.gov/Belmont. when you get to that website, it's basically the House Street Investigation Area website. At the very top of that web page is a banner. And on that banner, you click on it, and it's for the public comment period for this response activity plan. Click on that, and then it will take you to a page that has the links to these documents for this response activity plan, and also for the groundwater surface water interface response activity plan. So hopefully that should be easy to find on that Belmont website. If you don't have access to a computer, I'll also let folks know we did mail hard copies to the local municipalities. So Plainfield Charter Township, Algoma Township, and also the city of Rockford. So if for some reason you couldn't get access to the internet, or your computer's down or what have you, there could be a way where you could go call your township ahead of time, because I know a lot of the offices still are doing everything over the phone, and they could make sure they leave a copy and provide that to you in accordance with any social distancing rules.
Okay. Another question. When is Wolverine Worldwide required to implement the response activity plan?
Yeah, so I guess for the filter operation and maintenance, there are portions of it that they already are implementing that became effective with the consent decree. It's just our final approval of that plan to say, yes, it's okay to keep doing it this way moving forward. We just haven't given Wolverine that final approval yet for the filter O&M plan. So that will kind of memorialize the filter O&M plan once they get our approval or address any comments or edits we have. As far as the other response activity plans, they will have certain schedules within those plans proposed that they will need to meet that and those anticipated timelines. But it will be different for each different response activity plan, depending on what work is being proposed.
Okay.
I think that made sense.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. You mentioned the responsiveness summary that will be posted for questions. Will that responsiveness summary also include questions that we don't hear this evening? Any questions that you received throughout the public comment period?
Yeah, that will be the comments that, any comments that we receive written to me, or also that were emailed to that email address, the eagle-rrd-house street email address. So it will be kind of a summary document of all of those comments or questions that we get.
Okay. That is the last question that I have. I'm looking to see if there's any more in the question box. I presently don't see any hands raised.
Yeah, and if you think of any anyone watching after this, feel free to send me an email or shoot me a call, and we can go over anything in further detail.
Okay. Well, we won't delay it any further. Thank you again to Karen and Danielle for being present for this webinar, and we want to thank you as the attendees for taking the time out of your busy schedule to learn about this very important topic this evening. We will just want to remind you, I see Karen put the email address up, so you have again the contact information for submitting written comments about the response activity plan for the filters, and Karen's contact information as well. Again, thank you for joining us. We will share the slides that you have seen this evening, as well as a recording and a closed caption copy of today's conversation. That information will be provided to you by email if you provide us with your email address, and the information will also be posted on the Belmont, www.michigan.gov/Belmont website when it becomes available. It will probably be a few days, hopefully before the end of the week. So with that, thank you for joining us this evening and have a wonderful evening.
Bye, everyone.